All right, so in this module, we are going to go over the big idea, which is honestly one of the most confusing and tricky things for people. Um, to be completely honest with you, I haven't, I don't spend like a ton of time, like I guess consciously thinking about the big idea, but I do tend to have big ideas in what I'm doing. And I think it's more of a subconscious process for me. But that being said, obviously that doesn't really help you. So I do have a training. This is kind of based on something I did for my Copy Accelerator members a few months back for our mastermind. But then I've kind of expanded upon it, spent some time working on it. So with that being said, let's kind of just jump right in. And we're going to look at quite a bit of things, actually. This is 15 pages, but hopefully it'll help a lot. Right, so I guess first of all, let's look at we need to define the big idea, but even that isn't actually really easy, right? David Ogilvy, who's obviously one of the masters of marketing and kind of great advertisers of all time, he defines the big idea this way. He says, "You can do homework from now until doomsday, but you will never win fame and fortune unless you also invent big ideas. It takes a big idea to attract the attention of consumers and get them to buy your product. Research can't help you much because it cannot predict the cumulative value of an idea, and no idea is big unless it will work for 30 years. Okay, David. I feel like the grandioseness with which marketers, advertisers talked from like back in the 50s or when I don't know when the fuck Ogilvy was alive, honestly. But yeah. But all right. Cool. So I think the part here is it takes a big idea to attract the attention of customers and get them to buy the product. Kind of. But he's kind of also talking about the unique selling proposition, and we're going to differentiate between the two a little bit further down. But here's Ogilvy's checklist, which I do think generally is good, at least parts of it, right? Did it make me gasp when I first saw it? Do I wish I had thought of it myself? Is it unique? Does it fit the strategy to perfection? Could it be used for 30 years? I like that. And then here's really the best version of it from Ogilvy. A big idea is an idea that is instantly comprehended as important, exciting, and beneficial. It also leads to an inevitable conclusion, a conclusion that makes it easy to sell your product. I actually think this is the best definition of a big idea I've ever seen. I think this is it. So we'll come back to this idea. Well, Ogilvy's kind of part of it in this training. What John Ford says, and I think this is taken... let me see something really quick here. Just give me 1 second. I want to make sure I give the right attribution. There's John Ford, but then there's also this thing from Mark Ford, I believe. Okay, sorry. I want to make sure I was giving the right attribution because what I'm getting this next part from is from Craig Ballantyne's, a blog on Craig Ballantyne's website, actually, which was written by Mark Ford, but he's talking about something that John Ford told him, so I want to make sure I wasn't mixing it up. So anyway, right. What John Ford says, at least in this article, or think about it, when you have a great conversation, read a great book, or see a great documentary, what grabs you? Is it the litany of small details or the golden thread that unites them? More often than not, for most of us, it's the latter, and the more you get the core idea behind a story, a speech, or revelation, the more memorable that one core message becomes. This is just as true in sales copy. One message, well developed, just has more impact than ads, short or long, that are overloaded with competing ideas. So that's actually, I mean, this is really, really, really good too. Because again, going back to what did Ogilvy say, a big idea is an idea that is instantly comprehended as important, exciting, and beneficial. It also leads to an inevitable conclusion, a conclusion that makes it easy to sell your product. And what you have here with John Ford, right, it's basically the point of being there's a big, you grasp something intuitively. So and it's something that you understand and also that's shareable, as you're going to see. So yeah, the two resources that I have there, one is, like I mentioned, from Craig's website, and it's written by Mark Ford, and then he references John Ford in it, but it's a good thing about big ideas, so worth reading that. And then from AWAI, right, the American Writers and Artists Institute, they have a kind of a checklist for big ideas, and they talk about Ogilvy everything. So it's a nice resource as well. All right, so for me, if I'm my criteria for big ideas in sales copy, I think if you look at your writing, the questions I have is like, one, will I be able to quickly and succinctly explain the big idea behind it to my friends or family? And two, will I be able to do it without having to go back to the promo for any reminders? So that's super important, right? We want something that really, it's almost like a meme. And one way that may help you to think about your big idea and your sales copy, right? The technical definition of a meme is like an idea, behavior, style, or usage that spreads from person to person within a culture. But basically, great, right? Whatever on that. But in reality, most memes that go viral are ones that are short, immediately intellectually accessible, and that elicit an emotional response, whether that's humor, sometimes it's anger or curiosity, etc. Right? So I just found a couple silly memes. Ate spaghetti while wearing a white shirt, did get sauce on it. Like, I don't have to like go back to remember what this meme is. I'm like, oh, that's funny because it's really every time I wear a white shirt, I get like a stain on it. So this one just you intuitively are like, yeah, that, and then you would share it with others because you're like, yeah, I get this. I bet they'll get it if I share it with them too, right? This one, this one I just found this morning. I think it's funny. When Twilight is over, so is your career. Like it's just funny. It's like the actor guy like having put on weight is funny, but then like the picture of like the wolf being fat after, that just cracks me up. But so it makes me laugh. It elicits an emotional response, and it's something I could quickly and easily describe to somebody, even if I didn't share the meme. I'd be like, oh, it's funny. It shows like the actor from Twilight, when he was in the movies, and then now he's like put on weight. But then it shows like the wolf too, and the wolf looks all majestic. But then it shows the wolf now, and he's like kind of fat and out of shape. It won't be as funny as seeing it, but at least I could explain it to somebody, and they would get it right away, right? And then this one, I don't have even like a text for this one, but you've seen this for a million different things. This meme, right, of like the wandering eyes boyfriend or whatever they call it, where it'll be like I don't know, Google, Facebook ads, something like that, whatever it is. There's a million variants of it, but even that picture without the words, like you intuitively get it. You're like, it's kind of funny, but it's like you see the anger. He's checking her out. She's walking by, maybe oblivious, but maybe not because she's smiling. That picture is just like a great picture for it. Another way to look at big ideas and to understand them is to look at nonfiction. Because again, remember, we're really just looking for that one instantly graspable, I don't know that's the word, but instantly understandable, easy to grasp idea that you get and that you intuitively can share with others. And then to Ogilvy's point, that makes it easy and logical to buy the product when you get to that part too. So there's some great. I think business books do a good job of this. At least the most successful ones. So I have kind of some lists here, right? One is like Start With Why by Simon Sinek, which is a great book. And the big idea is basically that we spend all the time talking about the what and how things, but the most effective people and organizations first identify their why. Their why is the big driver behind everything they do. Getting clear on your why can guide everything you do. So, right, if you see that, people are like, if I was trying to tell somebody about the book, I'd be like, oh, have you read Start With Why by Simon Sinek? And someone might be like, no, I haven't. Like, oh, okay, well, basically it's about how we spend all this time asking how we're going to do things or what we're going to do, things like that, but we don't really ask why we're doing those things. And this is true for people, but also for businesses and organizations, but the most successful organizations actually start with why. And I think that's the whole big idea behind the book. And it also makes it easy to want to get the book because if you hear that and you're curious, if that resonates with you, then you're like, oh, I should read that book, right? From Good to Great by Jim Collins, another classic business book. The big idea is that there are certain predictable factors that enable mediocre companies to become great companies. When organizations apply these factors, they too can make the leap. Okay, pretty easy, pretty obvious, right? But basically in Good to Great, Jim Collins says that there's kind of a predictable checklist of things that great companies do, and that if mediocre companies follow that checklist, they can become great as well. Okay, pretty easy. We'll do two more. The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, a classic book for personal development. Right, the big idea. There are 7 habits that the most effective people strictly adhere to, and the rest of us don't. By tackling these habits in sequential order, we can become the most powerful and effective version of ourselves. Or really, the big idea is the title of the book, right? That there's 7 habits that highly effective people have that the rest of us don't have, and that's really just about it. And then I would add in maybe the sequential part, because that is important to the book. But maybe that's even not as important as just the fact that there are 7 habits of highly effective people. And the last one would be for The One Thing by Gary Keller, which is another great book. And here it's basically that the key to success is paradoxically to do less. The key to success and effectiveness in both personal and professional spheres is to cut out the BS and focus on the single largest needle mover. So again, if you're like, oh, have you read The One Thing? Basically it's that you should just focus on doing less and just focus on your one biggest needle mover and let everything else fall. And that paradoxically, when you do less, you actually accomplish more. It's the big idea of that book, easy to explain or describe or share to other people. And then I always go back to the Pimsleur approach, Pimsleur method, which is a sales letter that Chris Haddad wrote for Dan Reutman and those guys. But basically the big idea for that promotion and for the product is that it's easy, seemingly effortless for a child to learn a new language, while it's exceedingly hard for adults. The reason why is because children learn innately, while adults are taught through rote learning, memorization, and drilling. So if you want to learn a new language, you should learn like a child does. I think I copy and pasted this like directly from the sales letter, but pretty intuitive, right? It's like, it's really easy for kids to learn languages, but the reason why is they learn differently. Actually, I played it. It's really easy for a kid to learn a new language, but it's really hard for an adult to learn a new language. Why? Children learn in this like innate fashion, while adults learn through memorization and this sort of like academic version of it. But that doesn't work as well. So if we want to learn a language, we should try to learn it in the way that a child does. So that's just one that's always really resonated with me because it's like very intuitive to understand. And if you understand it, then it's very easy to be like, oh, okay, if this product teaches me to learn a language in the way that a child does, I should buy it if you're the target market, right? The way I kind of approach this, a lot of times it's kind of mechanism driven. So obviously you have to do your research still, right? You have to kind of think about who the market is and what their pain point is at least. And like, the pain point they want solved. And then actually, you need to look at the mechanism too, right? So, what's like the traditional explanation of the problem? What's the traditional explanation of the solution? Is there a new contrarian explanation of the problem or solution that catches your attention? Do any of those new or contrarian explanations make you excited? Do you believe that based off your research, your target market will also feel excited? And then can you find ample evidence to support these new or contrarian explanations? It's kind of like really, you'll see we'll look at examples of this here. And yeah, sometimes the easiest and best place to find that information is by simply searching news stories about the subject. So, for example, I did a product on telomeres. Telomeres are like basically the links, they're like the end caps of your DNA. So your DNA has like a strand, right? And there's these 2 caps on the end, and there's all of this research that says that telomeres are related to longevity and living longer and health and not getting sick and all of this stuff. So I'm going to open up a ton of these examples here. I mean, I had these books open, but we don't really need to really look at them. But let's open up a bunch of these. Okay, so if I was doing research, right, at this telomere product, I found this one. New doctors' DNA ages 6 times faster than normal in the first year. Long work hours of intern year associated with accelerated shortening of telomere regions of chromosomes. So this is pretty interesting. New doctors' DNA ages 6 times faster than normal in a year. And basically, if you read, the reason why is because of like the stress and long hours that undermines their DNA. So you could be like, stress. The big idea for this one could be that stress and lack of sleep age your DNA, and specifically the telomeres that can keep you young. This one. Telomeres are the new cholesterol, now what? Parts of our chromosomes called telomeres are seen as a sort of aging biomarker. Long, you've got a while. Short, you don't buy any green bananas. But what do we do with that information? Which, even that's kind of interesting. I mean, the big idea of telomeres is that, right, when you have long telomeres, you live a long time. When you have short telomeres, you don't live as long. So that kind of could be a big idea of a promo. The thing is, there's also the market awareness and sophistication. So that's why, if we go back to what I said up here about like the new contrarian explanation of the problem solution is important, and why we need to do the research for the market too. Because the thing is, if you do research, like a lot of the market actually for an anti-aging or telomere product is already familiar with telomeres. So the big idea of telomeres is great. We can use that to explain in the sales copy, but it wouldn't be the big idea of the actual promo because it's like not unique enough. Does that make sense? But the idea that telomeres are the new cholesterol is kind of interesting. And if you read this article, it's basically going to talk about how, rather than using cholesterol to like kind of as a marker for your health, measuring your telomeres would be a better option. Got it? So that was that. Remember the first one, stress and lack of sleep make your DNA age and telomeres age faster. This one's that telomeres are the new cholesterol. Looking at the length of your telomeres is an indicator of how healthy you are. So one, oxidative stress acts directly on telomeres to hasten cellular aging. So this one's basically oxidative stress, which comes about from pollution, smoking, obesity, all shorten your telomeres. And oxidative stress is like essentially kind of tied into inflammation and things like that too. All right. This one's pretty interesting. NASA's Landmark Twins study reveals the resilience of human body in space. Basically, this one is about how retired NASA astronaut Scott Kelly and his twin brother participated in an investigation and found that so Scott Kelly spent a bunch of time in space and his brother didn't, and they looked at to see how their DNA was affected. Basically what they found is that for Scott, right, the guy who was in space, his telomeres were longer in space, but then they became shorter when he returned to Earth, and then they became normal after 6 months. So that's like an interesting thing. Like, I don't know what you do with that, but it is interesting. This one is actually a similar article about how, this NASA twin study, but you could be like, if you found the reason why telomeres go longer in space, I don't know. It's interesting, but I don't know what I would do with that for a big idea. It's a hook I could put in, a fascination I could put into a promo, but it's probably not my big idea. There's this one. Rate of telomere shortening predicts species lifespan. So I'll make this font a bit bigger. A flamingo lives 40 years and a human being lives 90 years. A mouse lives 2 years and an elephant lives 60. Why? What determines the lifespan of a species? After analyzing 9 species of mammals and birds, researchers at the Spanish National Cancer Research Center found a very clear relationship between the lifespan of these species and the shortening rate of their telomeres, the structures that protect the chromosomes and the genes they contain. The relationship is expressed as a mathematical equation, a formula that can accurately predict the longevity of the species. The study was done in collaboration with the Madrid Zoo Aquarium and the University of Barcelona. The telomere shortening rate is a powerful predictor of species lifespan, the authors write in the prestigious journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, PNAS. The study compares the telomeres of mice, goats, dolphins, gulls, reindeer, vultures, flamingos, elephants, and humans, and reveals that species whose telomeres shorten faster have shorter lives. The relationship can be fitted to a certain type of mathematical curve, a power law curve, which the authors explained in PNAS. Oh, sorry, new sentence here, right? A power law curve, which the authors explain in PNAS, is also used to describe other processes such as population growth, city size, species extinction, body mass, and individual income. To Mario Blasco, head of the telomeres and telomerase group of the CNIO and director of the study, the fact that there is such a clear relationship between the rate of telomere shortening and lifespan suggests that we have found a universal pattern, a biological phenomenon that explains the lifespan of species and that warrants more research. What counts is not their length, but the rate at which they shorten. In the case of relationship, let me see if I want to keep going here. I'll just skip to this paragraph. It has been known for quite some time, thanks in large part to the work of Blasco's group, that telomeres are at the basis of aging of the organism. Telomeres make up the ends of chromosomes inside the cell nucleus. Their function is to protect the genes. However, each time the cells multiply to repair damage, their telomeres become a little shorter. Throughout life, it may happen that telomeres shorten too much and cannot regenerate anymore. When that happens, the cell stops functioning normally. Until now, however, no relationship had been found between telomere length and lifespan of each species. There are species with very long telomeres that are short-lived and vice versa. The CNIO researchers decided not to compare the absolute length of the telomeres, but rather their rate of shortening. It is the first large-scale study that compares this highly variable parameter between species. Human telomeres lose on average about 7,000 base pairs, the building blocks of the genetic material per year, whereas those of mice lose about 7,000 base pairs per year. To Kurt Whitmore, first author of the paper, this study confirms that telomeres play an important role in aging. There are people who are not convinced, and they say that, for example, mice live 2 years and have very long telomeres, while humans live much longer and have short telomeres. But we have shown that the important thing is not the initial length, but the rate of shortening, and this parameter predicts the longevity of species with a high degree of precision. And it just keeps going on. It's a better predictor than body size or heart rate and other things like that. So, okay, cool. Let's come back to this one, but just kind of remember. So if going back to this, right, what's the big takeaway of this one? Right, it's that it's not actually the length of your telomeres that predicts you're aging or getting old, but it's like the rate with which they shorten. So that's why even though a mouse may have longer telomeres than a human, they don't live as long because their telomeres disappear or shrink faster, right? Okay, cool. So let's go to here. Previously unknown protective role uncovered for telomerase and somatic cell aging. So this one's basically saying that telomerase, which is part of the telomere, basically, is reactivated in normal adult cells at the latter stage of cell aging, and this activity reduces the potential for DNA damage that could lead to cells becoming cancerous. So, kind of interesting that, but I don't know, right? Does that immediately reach out to you and you're like, oh, I can share that with everybody? And last one here, runaway mitochondria cause telomere damage in cells. Researchers at UPMC Hillman Cancer Center provide the first concrete evidence for the long-held belief that sick mitochondria pollute the cells they're supposed to be supplying with power. The paper, published this week in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, involved a causal experiment to kick off a mitochondrial chain reaction that wreaks havoc on the cell all the way down to the genetic level. I like to call it the Chernobyl effect. You've turned the reactor on and now you can't turn it off, said senior author Bennett von Houten, PhD, professor of pharmacology and chemical biology at the University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine and UPMC Hillman Cancer Center. You have this clean burning machine that's now polluting like mad, and that pollution feeds back and hurts electron transport function. It's a vicious cycle. So this one is super interesting to me, right? Because this idea of runaway mitochondria causing telomere damage and the idea of cellular pollution or the Chernobyl effect, those are really interesting ideas. Now, with that being said, having gone through all of these, which one did I choose? Ultimately, I chose this one. This is for a promo I actually did, right? Why this one and not the Chernobyl effect or doctor's aging or anything like that? I like the contrarian aspect, going back to my sort of... So I hear when that thing pops up. I like the contrarian aspect of it, right? Remember traditional explanation of the problem, solution, contrarian, um, target market will be interested. So what I liked about this one is that a couple of things. It was really easy to understand. It's not the length of your telomeres, it's the rate at which they shrink. So now this idea of your shrinking telomeres are responsible for aging, getting old, all of that. That's very easy. The reason you're getting old is because you have telomeres in your body and they're shrinking. And the faster they shrink, the faster you age. It's very intuitive. I also like the animal stuff, right? Because going back to like this whole article just starts with a paradoxical question. I think that's really interesting. There's a kind of the testable proof thing about why mice, don't live as long as humans, even though they have more telomeres than us at the start. There's the whole idea of a mathematical equation, which was very interesting to me, right? All of that. So that's why I think this one, the runaway mitochondria causing telomere damage, is very interesting. But like mitochondria, if I pick that, I have to then kind of explain mitochondria. And that's going to kind of bore people and take time and all that. So I think like it's something that's interesting, but not, it's just sort of more challenging than this idea of like, I'm already gonna have to explain telomeres in the promo, but now I have to explain telomeres and mitochondria and blah, blah, blah. But this one, I'm just talking about how everyone's got telomeres, they're important, they're the end caps on DNA. It doesn't matter how many you have or how long they are when, at the beginning, but what matters is how fast your telomeres shrink. And again, there's a direct link between the speed with which your telomeres shrink and the speed at which you get old and sick and all of that. Really intuitive and easy to grasp, right? So then I have to make kind of additional, that's the big idea, like, which we'll get to right here. But I'm going to skip ahead, right? Because the big idea was, it's not the length of your telomeres that matters, it's how fast they shrink. But even just reading from that, it's like, it's not the length that counts, programmed to die, the cells in your body are programmed to die. What if you could rewrite the code? Spanish researchers discover new immortality equation hidden inside of our cells. Cellular death clock, a better predictor than body or heart size. So I kind of just pulled out interesting stuff that would be good in the copy and around things that copying kind of hooks in. It's not really big ideas. I almost suppose like hooks and angles around big idea. But as far as getting the big idea goes, right, started this whole thing of lots of people know about telomeres and they've heard that shrinking telomeres are a hallmark of aging, disease, and death. What you probably haven't heard is that it's not the length of your telomeres that's most important, it's the rate at which they shrink. The fact is, mice often have longer telomeres than humans, yet they only live 2 years. Humans live 78 years. Why? Because the telomeres in mice are programmed to shrink at a much quicker rate than humans do, and they die much faster as a result. Spanish researchers looked at 9 different animals, including humans, and proved this. So if you want to live longer, stay younger, and protect yourself from disease, you need to stop or slow the rate at which your telomeres shrink. And then to put it more simply, it's not the length of your telomeres that matters, it's how fast they shrink. That's my big idea. The big idea here is, make sense? Again, something I can just go tell somebody really fast, like a meme or whatever. And if you have a product that then helps to stop like telomeres from shrinking, it's very easy to sell that after they understand the big idea, right? So going back to all the way back up to old Ogilvy here, big idea is an idea that is instantly comprehended as important, exciting, and beneficial. It also leads to an inevitable conclusion, a conclusion that makes it easy to sell your product. Well, in my opinion, if someone is interested in anti-aging and telomeres and things like that, then this part that, basically your shrinking telomeres are what, cause you to age. And that's the contrarian aspect. It's not the length of your telomeres, it's the rate at which they shrink. And the faster they shrink, the faster you age. That's really in fact, I almost put it like that. Faster they shrink, the faster they shrink, the faster you age and get sick. But even then, right, intuitively, now if I'm selling you a product that fixes that, you totally get it. You're like, oh yeah, that makes lots of sense. So yeah. All right, so let's look at some FAQs here. What role does the story play? So in my opinion, the story is used to illustrate the big idea, but the story is not itself the big idea. So I think the story, it's important to have a really good story, and that's curiosity and emotionally driven and all of that. Generally having a story is important, but it's not the actual big idea, right? Is the headline the big idea? I think that the headline will often promote the big idea, but sometimes it doesn't. I think in Pimsleur, it didn't, but I'm not gonna share the Pimsleur transcript in this course because it's not mine. I want to be respectful. But it's not the big idea, right? Is the mechanism the big idea? I think it's close, but the mechanism is lengthier, and the big idea is ultimately the single idea behind your argument or promise that someone can quickly understand and easily share with others. And then what's the difference between the big idea and the USP, unique selling proposition? So the unique selling proposition relates to the product being sold. It's the pitch that differentiates the product and makes you want to buy it. So the big idea relates specifically to the promise of the sales copy. It's what captures your attention and makes you want to engage with the copy. So do you understand that difference? Like the USP is really specific to the product, whereas the big idea is like more about the promise. What's the big idea of the promo of the copy and like that, and that makes it easy for you to then understand the USP. Will work because they understand the big idea works. So it's almost like you'd have the big idea first, and then the USP when it comes to actually selling the product. A couple kind of examples here. Burn, which you may remember from the copy module, right? Pull it up here. Harvard scientists discovered a biological loophole that forces your body to burn all of your stored fat at once. Really, that's like the big idea, and it's kind of in the headline too, right? It's like Harvard has discovered a loophole that lets your body burn all of your stored fat at the same time. It's called simultaneous fat release. So the idea with burn is like, instead of burning fat like in just your belly or your hips or one place, there's a way to kind of trigger your body so that you can burn fat everywhere at the same time. That's like the big idea. Or burn fat everywhere, hence the name burn. How about BizOp, right? We looked at that BizOp example about the closeout stuff, right? Closeout sales. Well, really, the big idea there was that you can make money acting as a middleman between retail stores and liquidators, and you don't need any formal education or training to do it. That's the big idea. And like that's basically it. I mean, that's also kind of the USP, I guess, in this case, so maybe sometimes they blend together. But it's like that's to me is the big idea behind the promo. That's the big idea that you can be instantly transferable to others. Right? If you read that promo and you're like, oh, there's a ton of retail stores that aren't able to sell all of their stuff, and there's a ton of liquidators who want to buy that stuff from those retail stores. So if you can act as a middleman, you can make a commission. That's like it's easy to understand and explain to somebody else, right? So, yeah, that's the big idea. At least the way I teach it, the way I look at it. I think people almost maybe put too much stock into the big idea. I mean, I think it's very important, but I think, again, I don't know. I take that back. I guess I just do it intuitively, but I understand that maybe some people don't. So if that's you and you don't intuitively do it, that's fine, of course. But now, hopefully with this training, it makes more sense and you can work on developing a big idea. And the best test for it, again, is to just be able to go talk to somebody and tell them what the big idea is and see if they really intuitively grasp it, find it interesting, and then could share it with others and they don't ask for clarification. If you can do that, then you've got yourself a good big idea. So hopefully this training is valuable and helpful to you.